Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and welcome into another episode of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. I am Andy Yanez. You can't see it on the screen, but you can follow me on Twitter at ayanez_5. And we're coming off the heels of yet another victory for the number one ranked Houston Cougars men's basketball team, the number one team in both the Associated Press, USA Today's coaches polls, the net rankings, Ken Palm, whatever other kind of
On and on.
rankings,
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
statistics, whatever floats your boat, whatever is your go-to source when it comes to the rankings. The Houston Cougars are probably going to be number one in those rankings, but in this game in particular, they were in a battle for first place in the American Athletic Conference. Believe it or not, had Tulane been able to upset the Cougars in New Orleans, they would have jumped ahead for first place in the American Athletic Conference, but now that was not the case. Houston came out victorious on Tuesday night inside of the Devlin Fieldhouse, and an interesting game. It seemed like first Tulane came out, they were hot from the field. It seemed like Tulane always had an answer for something that the run that Houston was able to make. And then when the Cougars were able to create separation towards halftime again, they had a big 4-point play that kept it just within 8 points. Started the second half. Marcus Sasser catches on fire. And when I mean on fire, he could have missed. Literally, he hit his first four baskets of the game, three straight of the half, not of the game, three straight 3-point shots to open up the second half. And he helped build a 16-point lead for Houston. I mean, honestly, at that point right there, I thought the game had ended, but give Tulane credit. They went on an 11-1 run. They got within five, and then the Cougars went on their final run to put the game out of reach. But joining me, as always, Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review, Dayon Dunlap. How are you two doing?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Big road win for the Cougs. The Tulane folks were hyped up, and I had a colleague who called the game. David Grubb called the game, sending me reels and stuff before the game about the pregame hype surrounding it and everything. But the Cougs answered the challenge. Had a great closing run with offense, which is different for this Houston Cougar team than previous teams. But they got it done, and on to the next.
Yeah, I'm doing good as well, man. Houston looked good, and we talked about them being more consistently as a team offensively on our last podcast, and I think they took another step continuing by doing what they did tonight from the floor.
Absolutely. So, where do you guys want to start? Should we start with Marcus Sasser, who, again, he's just been on fire in the second half these past two games for Houston? Could we start with Juwan Robertson from Mark, who really kept Houston? They started the game offensively, putting up all the points for the Cougars. Can we start with Jamal Shed with 7 assists and scoring he was able to do? And I think the biggest thing as I list off a lot of these names is that pick a weapon because the Houston Cougars are loaded. Jarvis Walker played for after missing a game due to an illness he had, and he was on the floor. They didn't need him to score, and the Cougars were still managed. They just have so many weapons, and I just continue to list off names down the list. Where do we start? And that's think about being an opposing team trying to game plan for this Houston Cougars. They got to be trying to answer the same question. Where do we start?
Let's start at the beginning of the game. In the first half, they went to Juan Roberts because the way Tulane plays, they really play four guards and kind of a big. And Juan went down low and scored in the post. And when he was 5 for 5 or 6 for 6, so he got started. Then Tremont got started. And what is this now? 2 or 3 games in a row for Marcus Sasser getting it done in the second half as a closer. I think, Dan, you need to coin the nickname, man, and it's called Marcus Sasser, the closer, and get that a shirt as well in our repertoire for Let's Rage Coogs. But different times, different players stepped up. And in the little 2.5-minute stretch down the stretch of the game, almost every Coug scored. Sasser scored, Shed scored, Jarris with that tremendous turnaround jumper. Balanced scoring, man. I mean, that's what it is. And we've said it all. Fans know it here watching the show, follow the Cougs. If the Cougs shoot 40% or better from 3, man, they are going to be hard as hell to beat. And they did it again tonight, man. They're winning with offense. Despite turnovers in the first half, they still got it done.
Yeah, I think I like starting there at the beginning because I think Jaylen really, really welcomed Jarrett's back because they really play well together, because Jarrett's ability to knock down that outside shot to give Jaylen more room to operate down low. Versus last game when he started with JVA. And so to see him get off that good start early, and also Tremont get out to a good start early, to kind of get the team off to some rhythm offensively. And then as they continue on, I just feel like their chemistry really is just sticks out to me. It seems like they're free flowing offensively, even in the half court. I know at times they had that drought, but it really was due to missed shots. They really get good shots, good quality shots, probably on 80, 85, 70% of their possessions. And early, they were getting the shots that won. And Jaylen, he does a really good job getting to his left hand. I know it's on the scouting report, but he does his little shimmy fakes, a little hard fakes to get his left hand. And once he gets inside, he's really hard to stop. And so credit to him and credit to, again, the coaching staff. They do a great job of identifying a matchup that they want to attack and executing by attacking that matchup. And you could tell it was a conscious effort to get the ball into Jaylen. You did a good job getting him off to that start.
Think about this, guys. Earlier in the season, I think one of the first two Let's Rage Coogs post-game shows, we talked about it. The zone defense, opponents who toss at the Cougs, was a problem. More they've seen it this season, the less a problem it's become. Tulane was like, they started in the zone. Cougs like, okay, bucket, inside, bucket, bucket, bucket. They were 13 for 16 to start the game. Ron Hunter's got to be like, damn, what am I supposed to do now?
And it looked like early on, I don't want to say they were letting Tremont shoot, but I think they rather Tremont shoot early in that zone. And he would, to his credit, was knocking them down, because you got Jamal bringing the ball up, and he's going to pressure the defense. And they're putting the extra emphasis on not allowing Marcus to get a good look, and probably even Jarris. And then the ball movement was so good. Tremont was locked and loaded, and he knocked the jumpers down early to kind of make them stretch out that zone and even eventually switch it up. But yeah, that's a good point, Chris. They did see the zone early in the season, and the more times they've seen it, the better they've gotten to execute against it.
And absolutely, you guys mentioned it when it comes to Kelvin Sampson. That's something that he mentioned in his postgame, something they were going to touch on later on as well. It's in regards how well Houston was able to move the ball on offense. And when it comes to what Ron Hunter had to say, let's check out what he had to say. But before we do like to take a pause and recognize that you are watching or listening to Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian Family, who is the primary sponsor of Let's Rage Coogs for the remainder of the Houston Cougars men's basketball regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. Let's Rage Coogs streaming live shortly after each Houston football and men's basketball game on YouTube, on the Houston Round Bar Review, and audio only the next day wherever you get Pod, Slam and Jamma, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any other audio only platforms. And of course, our other partners for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, beginning with HOUNIL.com, the subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston athletes benefit from the new name, image, and likeness rules. Athletes can create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe, and plans start at just $20 a month. Repeat it again. They start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to athlete subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. One more time, that's $20 a month at HOUNIL.com. And, of course, our other partners for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, who just put out a new Star Pizza commercial starring Ryan Elvin and Dejan Giroux that we aired last week following Houston's victory over South Florida. And be sure to check them out on social media. If you haven't checked out the video yet, you got to, because it was funny, it was comedic, and it's a perfect way to promote Star Pizza, who is one of our other sponsors for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, with various locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza has been Houston's best pizza since 1976. Be sure to visit them online at starpizza.net, where not only you can check out their menu, but you can even order online and stop by at any one of their locations and be ready to pick up some pizza. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And without further ado, check out what Tulane head coach Ron Herner had to say following Houston's 80-60 victory this past Tuesday night.
I mean, I'm proud of my teammates. We'll get them back.
Well, as I said before, man, when you come in here and you start a program and you try to build a program and you get COVID and all the things that we've got, I have never had a moment where I took a step back and said, you know what, I'm really proud of what I've done. Today was the first day. And not so much, I mean, I've been other places, but when I walked out and I saw just the people that were there and the support that we've got, and I wasn't happy for me, I'm happy for our kids. Because you got to understand, when we go to Cincinnati and we go to Wichita State, and we go to Houston, we always do this. This is normal for us on the road. But for our kids to have this, it was really special. And that's part of what, again, I want these guys to get the full environment of what's going on. One day this guy's going to come back and it's always going to be this way. He's going to come back and he's going to call me with his 8 to 10 kids he's going to have. And then he's going to say, wow, Coach, I was a part of something that started special. And so, again, if I can just say this, I thank you to every one of all of our students, all of our fans, our alumni. Thank you. This is not a one victory. But for someone who came in here, and my first game here, we had barely 200 people to what we're doing now. I just want to say thank you. That has nothing to do with me for our program. Thanks for the love of our hearts.
Next question right there.
Yeah, for both of you guys. But what was it about Houston that was just so challenging to play against? Is it just how they constantly? It always seems like they constantly had an answer for a runs you guys would have.
Well, you got to understand. I mean, Houston was in the Tulane part when Kelvin took the job. Mm-hmm. I have followed everything they've done. Even before I took this job, when I was thinking about taking this job, I was watching with Houston how he turned around with this program. Remember, Houston was terrible, and he kind of did this, and so he's built the thing to number one team in the country. And so I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I am absolutely studying every little thing that they've done, and that's what I mean when I say we're headed in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Because again, I really believe our league changes a little bit next year, but everything that I've done, I've studied. I've done this before, but at this level, I had to find somebody to figure. When I was at IUQI, there was a team kind of like this. It was Valparaiso, and Valparaiso going to the Sweet 16, and I had to take it to Program Division 1. So you got to find that one team that you got to just work every single day to catch, and that's been the team. So give them the credit, man. They're talented. I've been doing this a long time. That's a really, really talented basketball team. They're older and they got good guards. And so, but I got a good team. We didn't win the game, man. I've got a good team here.
When you had it within 5 and 11-1 run, I think that was a key moment. They were able to respond. What did you think that Houston did well, and you guys maybe should have done better right at that pivotal point?
Well, I looked at one of my assistants. I said I'm going to use timeouts to rest him. I wasn't going to sub. I thought, one of the things that's tough in our program is that we don't have a lot of guys that sometimes the moment can be too big. And so I was going to ride or die with my starters for about 38 games. I knew that coming in. This was one of those games where we would play a lot of people because again their strength is in numbers. They've got a lot of guys that have been here. So I was going to use the timeout. I knew we were tired and needed timeout. But I just thought we could just hang on, or if they could miss some shots, and neither one of those two things happened.
Yeah, and Sasser's 3-point shooting kind of make a big difference in that game too.
I mean, he's a good player. I think that what you saw, the two best guards in this league, Sasser and Forbes. I don't care what. I know there's a lot, but the two best guards in this league you saw on display tonight, and I really believe it. I'll go to war with this league here. But Sasser made great plays. That's what good players do. The difference is he's able to wrestle with it. I couldn't rest this guy. And when he comes off the floor, our numbers analytically just go down. So I had to keep him on the floor.
Any other questions?
Did anyone ask about Cross before I came in? Is he okay?
We'll know tomorrow. He was a warrior. So also, I want to. The last time I saw you people in here and all these cameras was on my day that I got the job. So.
Well, I'll cut it short because right there he went into the media. He said, thank you guys for coming out. And again, high praise for, again, kind of an interesting take on it. He said it right there. He wasn't taking it. There was no more victory for Tulane, but this is a program that you kind of see the effect that Houston had in multiple ways. One, on the court, but just off the court. This is a complete sellout. There were students waiting outside of the Devlin Fieldhouse. There was a long line for them, hours before the game tipped off. And whenever they were allowed to come in, they packed out the student section with the moment they were allowed to walk in. Still an hour left until tip. So from a status of where the program had come, from where Ron Hunter had taken over, that's a lot of we have to say in terms of kind of the growth that he had seen with Tulane, but particularly when it comes to the Houston Cougars and how it relates to the number one team in the nation. I think it's interesting, one, when you think about the comments that Hunter said, that he used what Kelvin Sampson has been able to establish at Houston as a blueprint for what he's doing over here in New Orleans at Tulane.
Yeah, and that's interesting because as D. Merrick has stated, he has not forgotten what Ron Hunter said when he was at Georgia Southern, referring to Coach Sampson as Grandpa. But that was Ron Hunter at Georgia Southern. Ron Hunter at Tulane is building a program, and he's patterning Tulane's improvement after Kelvin Sampson, the tremendous job Coach Sampson and his staff have done at Houston. Because Coach Hunter's right. Y'all know it. When Kelvin Sampson took over this job at Houston, it was a bad job. It was a full rebuild necessary for this program. This program, the fans were apathetic. The administration was just going through the motions and had just taken a nap in terms of facilities. And Coach Sampson told them, if you want to hire me, you got to promise me these things, X, Y, Z. And the administration, for the most part, has done that. And Coach Sampson has done his part, developing the program, the players. And look where they are now. They are nationally relevant year in, year out. And right now, they are the number one team in men's college basketball.
Yeah, and a packed old crowd. I mean, it not only is good for Houston to see that, to prepare them going forward with they're seeing the Big 12 every conference game, but not only that, I think it's good for the fans because you never know. It's rare that you get to see a number one team in the country. Not only that, it's rare that you get an opportunity to beat the number one team in the country. And what do you see when that happens? The crowd rushes the floor. So that's why they're going to see those packed houses game in, game out, especially while they're number one. And so I love it, not only for Houston, but for Tulane and every other school who doesn't routinely pack out, because it gives the student experience a good experience, potential to storm the court, and that's a good feeling. But for Coach Hunter, he's doing a good job of developing. They got some good guards over there, and for a spurt there, you see the recipe that can give Houston fits. When at first, of course, they had Forbes who was going, and then they had Jaylen Cook who started making some shots, and that's how when they had those two players making shots, they were able to get the lead down, I believe, to 5. And that's something that can give Houston problems when you got dynamic guards. But Houston is also, to counter that, such a good job defending guards. But when you got guards that can create and make shots off the dribble, it's tough to defend. But shouts out to Tulane. I definitely think they're one of the teams to beat in the conference. Football won the conference championship, and their basketball is going to have a good year.
Yeah, just on a side note, they showed Willie Fritz. He was in attendance. They showed him on the big board, and he got a standing ovation, as you'd expect. He's kind of become royalty here on the campus of Tulane. But I think that was a cool moment there where he acknowledged that he's kind of planted in what what Kelvin Sampson has been able to do at Houston and what he's trying to do at Tulane now. The other part of that soundbite in regards to his comments about Marcus Sasser, and he called them the best guard in the conference, and he said he'd also go to war with putting Jaylen Forbes in that conversation as well. Do you guys agree with him?
Kendrick Davis says hello. Kendrick Davis is a hell of a player in this conference, but this conference has good guards. The national media may not realize, but this conference has a lot of good guards. And I don't know if I'd pick Jaylen Forbes over KD or not, but, let's do the discussion, but I'd pick Kendrick Davis.
Yeah, that's tough right there. But I think this year, I mean, to his credit, he scored 20 points over every conference game this season, and his team is second in the conference right now. But Chris, the reigning conference player of the year, Kendrick Davis, of course, is in that conversation. But, I mean, it's a toss-up. You want more size with the ability to create off the dribble, make shots, or do you want a guard who can control the game like Chris and also make shots and get others involved? So it's pick your poison, but he's definitely in the upper echelon of guards for sure in the conference.
Real quickly, before we transition over and hear what head coach Kelvin Sampson had to say following Houston's victory over Tulane, you are watching and or listening to Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family, the primary sponsor for Let's Rage Coogs, not only for this episode, but for the remainder of the men's basketball regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. Of course, we'd like to say to our other partners, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars micro collective, their micro collective, not a full collective, but they are working with Houston Cougars student athletes to create content, in particular when it comes to commercials with Star Pizza, like we've seen in the past with D'Anthony Jones, like we've seen with Big Hawk, and like we saw last week here on Let's Rage Coogs with Ryan Elvin, in terms of athletes on the current roster, of course, with alumni as well, with Dejan Giroux, who's part of that commercial with Ryan Elvin, and that transitions over to Star Pizza, who is another sponsor for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, with various locations across the Houston area. Be sure to visit starpizza.net and make it your go-to spot for some hot pizza, because you're always going to be in the mood for pizza. Next time you are, make sure that it is Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. Multiple locations. You can order online on starpizza.net. Of course, our other partner for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs is HOUNIL. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Kansas, big news right there. They finally fell tonight on Tuesday night, but I digress. We'll circle back to that later. But national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. Those schools have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to get their athletes NIL compensation, and that gives them a huge advantage over U of H, where NIL is still in its infancy, but you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe to player-created content like essays, video podcasts, and get access to private events with U of H players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans can get an inside look at their lives, and plans start at just $20 a month. And that money helps the Cougars retain players to stay atop in basketball and help build momentum in football. Once again, that's HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from Cougar athletes. Subscribe today at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. And on that note, here's what Houston Cougars men's basketball head coach Kelvin Sampson had to say following Houston's 80-60 victory over Tulane.
And ours not. And then after that, our ball's going in and theirs not. That's kind of it.
Anything about what you guys were able to execute down the stretch, or it was just plain and simple ball movement?
Now, we missed a lot of open shots during that stretch. And then when we got the lead, they missed some open shots. So basketball's not a game of rocket science. So when you start analyzing this thing, just remember the old coach. I'm not near as smart as you guys, but I know that it's a simple game. When the ball goes in, sometimes it's make and miss. I thought our defense was good. We guarded them. And we did a great job of defensive rebounding. And we had to. Anytime you can hold them to 35% from the floor in their gym in the second half, they scored 28 points. You guys from New Orleans know better than me, but I think they were averaging about 85 points a game.
In conference play, 88.
88. Is that overall or just in this gym?
Overall.
What do you think about that? 88 points overall, and we hold them to 28 points second half. But at halftime, we knew there was a couple things that we're getting a little loose on. And this is our 19th game. So as a coach, you know where you're having a little slippage. They came out hot, then we tightened down and guarded them really good for a long time. And then we had some time and score situations. For instance, I didn't call my use it or lose it timeout in the first half, right? But we had Mark got an offensive rebound. We had a couple offensive rebounds. And all of a sudden, the last one, the ball was the shot clock was under 30. So now and we work on time and score all the time. So time and score situation dictated that we bring the ball out and hold it for one, and I have the option of using my user to lose it, right? But I didn't, because Tremont, instead of bringing it out, shot it, and so we were up 40-28. So instead of up 40-28, it's now 40-32 because of a poor decision. But those are the things that you work on as coaches. You know, put those things in the hopper, go to practice, and use that situation to get better. Our freshmen especially will learn from that.
What could you say about Sasser's recent form and what his scoring ability and composure in an environment like this does for the team?
Yeah, we've had so many guys step up in key moments. The freshman Arsenault, I remember, was really good at Oregon. Walker and Mark both were really good at Virginia. Cincinnati, we had 2 or 3 guys really good. But Marcus, just playing okay. Not playing bad. Don't confuse shooting poorly with playing bad. A lot of times you don't make shots, but you're playing great. Marcus always plays really good, but he hasn't shot the ball well until recently. But nobody puts more time in it. And I've always believed that eventually your work and your sweat equity will pay off. And Marcus is too good a shooter. He's missing a ton of wide open shots. But he's learned to trust his teammates too. He didn't have to go work for him as hard. That's why this is a really good passing team. Walker's a really good passer. Roberts is a really good passer. Obviously, Shed and Tremont. Tremont's a good playmaker. So once he realized that, guys that are, scouts are following, and we've had a ton of NBA guys, and that's a blessing that we've had. Whether it was Nate Hinton or Quentin Grimes or Monty Brooks, go down the list, Dejan Giroux. We've got a bunch of NBA guys look at, and you got to be careful that you got to be careful in your teaching to them, not to let that affect how you play. You're not playing for them; you're playing for your teammates. What is it we need from you to help us win? Some nights it may be 6 assists and 10 points. Some nights it might be 20 points and no assists, based on how they guard you. But
once again, that was Houston Cougars head coach Kelvin Sampson. So he touched on a lot of different things, including that answer that they had to the 11-1 run that the Tulane had to cut Houston's deficit to just 5, and then, of course, kind of the progression that Marcus Sasser has seen, especially in the last 2 games when it comes to an offensive resurgence, and in particular what he said, don't confuse when shots aren't falling in, don't confuse it for a player playing bad. But in particular, when it comes to Marcus Sasser's case, and you mentioned the ball movement, something that at times could even, I don't know if you could say hurts this team, but just the personality of this team, where they're all kind of much more pass first, top to bottom, with the exception with a few couple players, and at times it'll kind of work against them, if that makes sense. That's something that it was kind of a change in mindset. We'll hear from Marcus Sasser before the conclusion of this show and hear what he had to say, but that's kind of at halftime, it was the difference, and he was just looking to be more aggressive coming out of the tunnel in the second half.
And that's the role he's played lately. He lets his teammates eat, as more and more folks say in basketball vernacular lately, in the first half, and then he's taken over in the second half, and he's still being efficient, as he touched on almost not quite 2 weeks ago. So the team is playing better. Jarris Walker had an off first half. Turnovers, he just seemed out of sorts, but he played better in the second half. This team just has ways. Offensively, this team is better than previous Houston Cougar teams. Defensively, they're not elite compared to those teams. So they're winning differently this year. That's what Coach Sampson does. As Dayon like to say it many times, Coach Sampson allows the game to determine how to play, how to run plays, what to do, what plays are called. The game will tell you what to do. This team is winning differently, and they're 18-1.
He really just described that. Said the game isn't rocket science. It'd tell you whether we need you to score 20 points or we need you to have 10 assists. And Jamal's a good example of that because he's the one that kind of dictates that. Whether they need to score 20, he'll score 20, going all the way back to against Arizona in the tournament or this year at different times. But also with Marcus, early on, he just wasn't making shots. He was getting the same shots, but he just wasn't knocking them down to the efficient rate that he is now. And then that second half, he just got going. It just really just went off. I mean, Andy, you was in the building, and what did it look like in person? I mean, I know what it looked like on TV, but when you see him going like that, what is it like? What is the crowd like when they see him? Are they gasping after every shot?
Oh, absolutely. You can hear, especially whenever they came out of the second half, there was kind of, well, first of all, the people hadn't settled in yet coming out of halftime. There was still kind of a murmur as everyone tried to fall back into their seats, which Devlin Fieldhouse is an interesting setup with the way it's structured. But when you look at how Marcus Sasser, he personally started the second half on an 8-0 run. And that, by the time everyone kind of settled down, all the buzz from the arena had just been taken out. A big reason for that was because Marcus Sasser, every time he let go of this release, you could kind of hear like, that kind of anxiety, or just kind of that like, dang, here he goes again. Especially since he has such a smooth motion, everyone thinks it's going in the moment he releases it. Then they were able to make that rally. It looked like they had cut it to 5. Tulane, this place was popping again. It was energetic. And then again, not just Marcus Sasser in that instance, a lot of other players, Tremont Mark, Jamal Shed, they were all able to execute and just hit daggers. And towards the 3-minute mark, when Houston had extended this lead, it was kind of clear that the game had been put out of reach. And Marcus Sasser hit another 3. And then immediately after you see that, people start heading for the exits. I mean, the way to describe it for Houston, at least in this game against Tulane and what we've seen a lot in the season, a buzzsaw. They just continue and continue and continue to produce. And a lot of teams, there have been some instances where UCF, USF, Alabama have been able to hang with Houston, but for a majority of the season, teams just have not been able to have enough weapons. And like you saw in that clip from Ron Hunter, he didn't have the luxury to be able to rest the starters. He was using his timeout to buy them rest. They're not deep like Houston. And the Cougars just keep coming and coming and coming. And they keep going and going and going. And most teams just cannot. They don't have enough weapons to, one, be able to handle that skill set that Houston has, that versatility, and two, be able to go toe for them for in a full 40-minute game.
Yeah, another thing that stuck out to me, and that Coach Sampson mentioned, was the ball movement, because the ball movement goes back into the chemistry and as well as the consistent offensive as a team, because they move the ball so well. So you can't really just hone in on Marcus as much because the ball is steadily moving. And then after he goes to 8 straight, Jamal will drive in and make a bucket. And so, like Andy is saying, they're constantly moving, them specifically in the ball. It's just offensively, this team is really hitting its stride, whether it be turning you over, getting out in the half court, getting out in the full court, getting points off of those turnovers, or if it's executing in the half court or getting whatever the case may be. This team can beat you in a plethora of ways. They know how to handle runs, and they got an ultimate closer there if the game is close, or if it's not too close, we need to put you away. We got somebody who can put a knife in your heart.
Last 4 games, Marcus is 19 for 39 from 3. I think that's pretty damn good. 19 for 39 from 3. Touch on a couple of things in our comment section. The offensive rebounding, well, it depends on the opponent, because one home game, the Cougs shot well and still rebounded offensively almost 60% of their misses. Tonight, it was about 30% of their misses, but they still shot 50% from the floor. So there weren't that many misses to even rebound. And then Justin's question about the number 1 team being on ESPN Plus, that's more to do with the conference. Just, this is an American game. The American is on ESPN Plus. Big 12 is on. Big 12 is on ESPN. They weren't going to bump Kansas State They definitely weren't going to do that.
ESPN, Big 12 had a ranked game on ESPN Plus tonight. But
Right.
Texas and Iowa State. So I don't know if that's an American thing or what is it, but I don't think these games are just really honestly big enough to be
that too. I mean, I think it's in terms of contract. You know, the American is contracted to so many games on ESPN Plus. That number is going to be bigger than contracts for Big 12. Big 12's got ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, and ESPN Plus. So won't be an issue in a few months. So this is where it is. The Cougs got a few more games on ESPN Plus, and plus, because of the contract, but I think the conference is hoping that fans will spend money to see the number one team in the country on ESPN Plus. Some fans will do that too. Some fans say, hey, I want to see the Cougs play. How much is it? Okay, I'll take that $10 for a month. I'll do that. Some fans be like, nope. Tell me when they come on ESPN. Well, they'll be on ESPN on Sunday. Give or take.
Yeah, and that's such a interesting thing. And when you look at how the local media here in the New Orleans area responded, I mean, they had a lot of TV stations. Something that Ron Hunter said at the conclusion of his postgame conference. This was going back to yesterday when they had their availability during their practice. They said they saw all the cameras going into it. He had a joke. He said he thought he had gotten fired. He said he was going to go talk to the athletic director when he saw all the cameras in the facility for Tulane yesterday ahead of this game. But that just goes to show the impact that Houston, at least having that number one tag on you from a media standpoint, has on an opposing team, in this case Tulane, and from a fan perspective, a sellout, a rowdy crowd. And it's interesting to note, once they get into the Big 12, obviously a year from now it'll be a much different circumstance if Houston's still in this position where they're number one come a year from now. But you know, again, when you look at the American, ESPN Plus on the American, very different when you think of ESPN Plus for the Big 12. But real quickly, one final time, that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. The Saxenian Family is the primary sponsor of Let's Rage Coogs, not only for this episode, but for the remainder of the regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. Let's Rage Coogs, the unofficial Houston postgame show of football and men's basketball. And of course, thank you to our partners, beginning with HOU NIL. HOUNIL.com is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston athletes benefit from the new name, image, and likeness rules. Athletes create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to UH athletes. Subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And of course, shout out to our other partners, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, the entity behind the Star Pizza commercials, who is our third sponsor of today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. Be sure to visit them online at starpizza.net to not only view their menu, but order online across their various restaurants in the Houston area. We've talked a lot about Marcus Sasser, and let's just hear from him because we have talked to him about him a lot. Here's what he had to say post-game following Houston's victory over Tulane.
Do what I do best for the team, and I feel like I was passing up a couple shots, but I was just trying to be a facilitator at the time. But he was just telling me, just doing what I do best is just gonna help the team. So I just took what he said and put it to use in the second half.
Marcus, can you describe for you like that second half to start out? Like I think you hit like your first 4 shots coming out of the second half.
Yeah.
Was it something that clicked? Was it just you hitting your shots?
Just coming out being aggressive. I feel like first half I was being passive. I wasn't trying to be that aggressive, but just putting my mind on being aggressive and trying to put the ball in the hole. And I really just got rolling when I seen the ball go through the hoop.
I mean, you've got a couple of games in a row now. Do you think you're rounding in the form? I mean, is this you playing some of your?
Yeah, I just feel like I had to, get back and really just try to adjust. Because, this year teams is playing me different and stuff like that. So as the season goes on, you learn to adjust, and I feel like I learned how to adjust, and I'll be comfortable, playing while the season keep going.
What player is Kelvin Sampson? A lot of players Texas has been here a long time. I mean, then you acquired down to the end. Is that a nice moment when you first see that?
It's always a good feeling, you know, when you go on the road and get a big W like that. But I just feel like that's part of adversity. I feel like we part of our culture, you know, we prepare for that. So, you know, when it does happen, we come out with the outcome like this. I just really just got to play through adversity and be confident. And I think that's what we did tonight.
Marcus, coach was talking about how this team in particular is a really, really good passing team. You guys are able to set each other up. From your perspective, how do you think it adds like an extra layer to how more difficult does it make it for you guys to be guarded when you guys can pass the ball? I think you guys have like over 20 assists.
I feel like all five of us, you know, the whole starting five, kind of a pass first mindset. So like coach said, he told one of us to be aggressive. So sometimes I feel like it can hurt us, but you know that's always a positive when you got five people that love to pass the ball.
You hit, I think it was your 7th from the right wing, 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Did you see everybody get up and start leaving?
Yeah, I saw it. It's always a good feeling, you know, to do that. I feel like that's kind of like a dagger, you know, so it's always good to hit them dagger shots like that.
How many weapons do you think this team has? Because at the first half, it was Tremont and Juwan. They had like 16 points to start the game, and then Jamal Shetty got in there as well. And then obviously, of course, you. Like, what's the ceiling of this offense?
I still don't think we're even close to our ceiling. We're still learning how to gel and play together with each other, but I feel like that's what can make us so dangerous because, you know, everybody is a weapon. Everybody do something good. And that's why I feel like each night, you don't never know who's going to go off. But this team is real deep, so we got a lot of work to do, really, and I feel like we ain't even close to our ceiling, really.
In the last, when they had 11-1 run, they were within 5. What were you thinking there? I know you responded to 7 straight points, and you hit a 3 during that. But I think you also hit the pull-up number too. Or
that was teamwork. Just, you know, it's basketball. It's a game of runs, you know. When they go on the run, Coach called us good timeout, you know, settle us down, try to settle the crowd down. And, you know, we just have to take a step back and, you know, get back to our principles, try to get stops, and try to go on our run. And I feel like that's what we did.
Still a lot of ceiling left for this Houston Cougars offense. They haven't really scratched the surface. And I asked a similar question to Jamal Shed, and he kind of mirrored the same sentiments from Marcus Sasser. I think Jamal kind of expanded a little bit more on it in terms of, you know, it's still, when you look at the starting lineup and last season, this is the starting five. It's not a cohesive unit in terms of they played with each other last year, and they're just coming into the season sliding in. Tremont Mark, he missed most of the season with his labrum tear. Marcus Sasser, we know story with his foot. Juwan Roberts sliding into the starting position. And of course, Jarvis Walker is a freshman. So from Jamal Shed's perspective, he said that they're still learning their games, for lack of a better phrase, and they're still continuing to prove day in and day out, which from an outside perspective makes this team offensively, the potential they have, even that much more impressive, and really from an opposing perspective, scary.
That's the thing. We've touched on it throughout these Let's Rage Coogs shows. This team offensively has so many weapons. It really is for an opponent, pick your poison, because there have been some games recently where the shots weren't falling for Jamal Shed. Tonight they were. So that's another weapon for him, for the team. Jarvis Walker, shot wasn't falling for him tonight. And the team still scored 80 points. Okay, just imagine if Jarvis, Juwan, Marcus, Tremont, Jamal, Emmanuel all have great shooting games in the same game. Who's going to be that team? So offensively, this team still has room to get better. You know, we're quibbling about the defense isn't great, who's an elite defensive player. May not be on this year's team, but this team has more offensive weapons. And that's how they might be people.
Yeah, and exactly what he said is exactly what I see in regards to their chemistry getting better and better and them learning each other better and better, because it seems more effortlessly. It seems like they're just out there just hooping, and like they know each other's spots, they know where each other want the ball. And then Jarvis, his second half, so that shot that, like Marcus just said, when you see the ball go through the net, I think Jarris shot a 3-foot step out of bounds, but saw the ball go through the net. Then you see his aggression turn up a little more. Then he started getting it going a little bit, and he had his stretch where he had it going. But like Chris is saying, if you have a game where everyone's clicking, I mean, this team is going to be hard to beat. But you got 4 of your starters in double figures tonight.
Yeah.
And so when you have something like that and your All-American player who, if he could continue on this rate, I think he probably can win Player of the Year. There's some other players out there like Jaylen Wilson for Kansas that's in the running, and as well as the big kid that's at Purdue right now.
Edie,
Edie. Yeah. And so if Marcus can keep playing on this clip and Houston can keep having the success that he's having, he could definitely make a run for that award. But overall, I mean, the chemistry is just growing. The ball movement doesn't hesitate. I feel like they know when they need to get a shot from Marcus or from whomever it be. They always touch the ball at the right time. And Tremont, I think his ability not only to make outside shots, but to be prolific and efficient in that mid-range game, it just makes him even more potent on the offensive end because you have to account for him. You can't sag off of him when Jamal is penetrating and breaking down the defense, or when Marcus is in the pick and roll offense and he's creating or getting all the way inside or going one-on-one and isolating. And so everyone can beat you. And like he just said, everyone is good at something, and that chemistry is only getting better and better. And I don't think they reached their ceiling yet, like he said.
And Reggie Cheney came off the bench and provided a spark defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even talked about Javier Francis, another potential weapon for this team going forward.
Emmanuel Sharp hit a big 3. He was the first non-Tremont Mark, Juwan Roberts Cougar to score in this game early on the first half. So again, going back to the theme just a little bit earlier in the show, so many weapons, top to bottom. We're not even talking about Terrence Arsenault. We're not even talking about a lot. Ramon Walker, who back with the program, rejoined. He flew out, made the trip down to New Orleans, and went through warm-ups practice yesterday with the team. So that's good news and positive directions in terms of him being able to rejoin the program. But again, he was a key piece in Houston's team last year. Granted, a big reason for that was due to injuries. But again, it just goes back to that depth with this Houston Cougars team, which that's their biggest asset.
That is, and that's one thing Coach Hunter touched on. Tulane does not have the quality depth that this Houston team does. So these Cougs can just wear you down. And Coach Sampson did not go deep into his bench. And at some point, he might go 8, 9, 10 deep. Then what are some teams going to do? Because there are other teams who can match them player for player deep. But it's not a lot.
And not only that, not many players have the quality of 5 to 6 players that we have. Like Coach Hunter mentioned, they don't have the depth, but also they don't have the quality of a collection of 5 or 6 or 7 players, or even if you just want to go with 5 that Houston have to be able to sustain a high level of game throughout a full 40 minutes. And so, I mean, Houston, I mean, they're just rolling, right? I don't see anyone beating them at least in the next week or two. I think they're going to continue this win streak. It's going to grow more and more.
And,
Houston, they've won 9 in a row. Sorry, Chris, I'll go back to you in a bit, but they've won 9 in a row now. They improved to 18-1, down 6-0 in the American Athletic Conference. They now have a 2-game cushion over everybody else in the American Athletic Conference.
Yep.
It is barely January 17th, and they already have a 2-game cushion. This is something we're going to cheap plug to the Pod Slamma Jamma podcast. For those of you that are watching on the Houston Round Bar Review, go be sure to subscribe to the Pod Slamma Jamma YouTube channel. But something that Dayon and I touched on in our recent episode on Monday night. But that's something that, and obviously we know the answer from a national perspective. If Houston, say if they were to lose more than one conference game, there's going to be that argument like, hey, this is probably why they shouldn't be the number 1 seed. But do you guys think from another perspective in terms of being battle tested that would affect the Houston Cougars come the NCAA tournament time if they say they and all 3 of us don't think that they'll be able to cruise through the conference and go undefeated, but say they do and face relatively non-challenge. I know UCF and USF have given Houston problems, but say they are able to cruise, could that hurt Houston in terms of not being battle tested once they get into the NCAA tournament?
It could. I mean, it depends on the team, the matchups, but they, as you touched on it, they have been tested already in conference play. in these first 6 games, by UCF and USF. So this team is at the point where we are searching for things to find negative about this team. Okay. Potentially what could be wrong, what could hurt this team. This team is not perfect. They do have issues defending guys who can get buckets one-on-one. That could be an issue. But this team is different than previous teams because they can score and match that person and may have more offensive weapons than many other teams that they will face in the country this year. So let's enjoy the ride. I mean, as Coach Sampson makes fun of us in media, we overanalyze and analyze the game and this, that, that's what he does. That's what you guys do. That's your job. I'm going to just take the win and move on. So let's just take the win and move on and Temple on Sunday.
Yeah, I think they are being challenged every game. Like it was a challenge tonight when they got the lead cut to 5.
Yeah.
On the road, that's a challenge and adversity they have to overcome, which can help them going forward. And so to your question, Andy, if they can win out, and they're going to be challenges within these individual games, but as long as they get the win, it could be hard for them to. It just depends on what happens in other conferences, though. Because if Kansas only loses 1 game in conference play, in which I don't think they will, then they rightfully should deserve a number 1 seed. And so it just depends on what happens. But for Houston, taking care of what they can, controlling what they can control, if they can take care of business, it'll put the position them right where they want to be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And because other teams are losing or have lost in their conferences, the Cougs are positioning themselves to be a 1 seed. Just a question of how high up a 1 seed do they become. If the number 1 overall seed, they will need other teams to lose multiple times, probably 2 or 3 times, and then only lose maybe 1 more time in conference play. That's doable. Maybe not, very likely, because you need Kansas to lose a couple more times, Purdue lose a couple more times. Alabama beat Houston, so they need to lose a few more times as well. But the Cougs will be in Las Vegas region, as most bracketologists say right now, but they're at a point where if they would have lost tonight, they would have still been a number 1 seed. That's how well they're playing and how other teams losing has benefited Houston.
Yeah, and like Dale said, at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control, which is going to be interesting going down the stretch. And Houston returns to action on Sunday against Temple, and then they travel on the road, another tough road challenge next Wednesday in Orlando at UCF, which, of course, like we mentioned, New Year's Eve, the Knights came into the Fertitta Center and gave the Houston Cougars a tough challenge. Now, Chris, that game against UCF on Wednesday will be on ESPN Plus as well. So, like D Skill said, I wouldn't take being on ESPN Plus as disrespect. ESPN is trying to build that subscriber base. They don't want be seen as the service for scrub games forever, which is a valid point. But then, Chris, you bring up a valid point too when it comes to Houston and UCF. I think it's interesting.
Both
matchups
will be on ESPN
Plus for the American Athletic. But as we wind things down here, I'm the last person left standing here inside of the Devlin Fieldhouse. Even the Tulane communication staff is gone. So now, when we wrap things up, one of the players that we haven't touched on a lot in regards to Houston's victory over Tulane was Juwan Roberts, him alongside Tremont Mark, they played key roles early on in the first half to keep Houston offensively afloat. While Tulane came out, and it really seemed like I wouldn't say you'd call it on fire, but it seemed like they were doing a good job being able to keep pace with Houston early on. And Mark and Juwan Roberts especially Roberts, and were able to provide support for Houston offensively. And Roberts in particular went on a stretch where he scored a series of points that kept Houston afloat.
And, I'm old school, so I love when teams work inside out. And the Cougs started the game going to Juwan down low on the block, inside out. And he got dunks, jump hooks, he got whatever he wanted. And Tulane had to adjust. And that's the benefit of him getting to his spot. Deion talks about it. He gets to that shoulder, get that left hook. If it's going, then teams have to, okay, how are we going to defend him? If the double team Juwan, then Juwan kick it out, and then you just swing the ball up around the perimeter for open threes. Cougs had a rolling early on because Jamal Roberts had a rolling himself early on. Great start for him.
And although he does get a lot of his stuff in the half court and they do run sets for him, he's still one of those players where you don't have to run sets for him and he can still be just as dominant and just as effective. And so just like on any given game where he might not have a high number in scores, but he can still be just as effective and just as dominant. He's one of those players, like I mentioned, like, what do you need, coach? And he can go out and deliver that. So kudos to him for not only developing that offensive game and being able to be counted on when we need it, and being able to produce it. So he's definitely going to be a vital piece going forward.
He had, I think, a layup and 3 dunks out of his first 6 buckets. So, I mean,
Javier Francis got a couple of points in that fashion too. It's like something that Kelvin touched under in his post-game conference too. They knew coming into the game, like Tulane, they knew what they like to run on defense, in particular the different zone looks that they give. So what makes them tough is the talent that they have in being able to execute that. So he felt that the Cougars were well prepared coming into the game. It's just a matter of being able to execute the game plan they had set forth, which during stretches the Houston Cougars were able to do, and they were able to pull out the 20-point victory. So now, as we wrap things up, top to bottom, Kris, I'll go over to you first. Any takeaways, any additional takeaways that you have from Houston's 80-60 victory as we wind things down here on Let's Rage Coogs?
I just checked the stats. The Cougs made 12 threes, had 5 layups, and 6 dunks. So they beat Tulane inside. They beat Tulane outside. When you got it rolling like that both ways, it's going to be hard to beat a team. And now, as we all know, Cougs are 6-0 in the conference. 2 games up in the loss column over everybody else. So Temple on Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. on ESPN. So just got to come back, learn from mistakes, tweaks here and there, defensively, rotations, communication a little bit. You know, we're picking at things here to find fault with in a 20-point road win. But Marcus Sasser, once again, closed the deal in the second half, scored 17 of his 23 in the second half. Looked like an All-American. So great sign for the Cougs going forward. And they are the number 1 team in the country, period.
And Dayon.
One thing stuck out to me, Houston, too many turnovers. They had 14 turnovers tonight. Tulane was able to get 10 points off of those turnovers, and consequently, Houston forced 14 turnovers as well, but had 22 points off of those turnovers. But those turnovers allowed Tulane to get back into the game. So Houston has to do a better job of taking care of the basketball, especially as we get closer and closer to March, and just kind of clean up the game and not have turnovers, to have those slaps and allow teams to get back in the game, especially when you're up in such a large margin. And so as long as they can take care of the basketball, continue to play free, move it, play unselfishly, then they're going to continue to win and go as far as we want them to go.
Right on point. Once again, the final score inside of the Devlin Fieldhouse in New Orleans. Houston Cougars, number 1 Houston Cougars, both in the Associated Press and USA Today's coaches poll, Ken Palm, the net rankings. The list goes on and on and on with this Houston Cougars. They walk away with 80 points, while Tulane, they only walk away with 60. Kris, like you alluded to, Houston as a team shot 55% from the field on 3-pointers alone. They shot 50% on those shots. And when as a team you shoot 50% from 3, you're not going to lose often. They got 36 points off 3-pointers. So again, just goes to show how dominant of a performance, how strong of a performance that was for Houston offensively. Marcus Sasser, again, the leading scorer for Houston. He finished with 23 points. 17 of his 23 points came in the second half. Jamal Shead, he had 14 points, threw in an additional 7 assists. Tremont Mark had 12 points. He had 7 rebounds, and Jawan Roberts rebounds. Javier Francis didn't have double-digit points, but he did have 9 rebounds. He had 6 points. So Javier Francis getting it done as well. Kris, where can people? Jarris Walker, did I? Yes, you're right. Jarris Walker had 6 points. He had 9 rebounds. Javier Francis had 4 points and 3 rebounds. So look at the freshman being able to execute rebounding as well, which is something that Kelvin's mentioned in the past. Kris, where can people find you on social media and anything else you'd like to plug?
Appreciate it, Andy. As always, love being part of the Let's Rage Coogs post-game shows, and we got to discuss a pregame show for a road game coming up at some point during conference play. But you can find me on Twitter at THEHR Review, some folks say some folks say the HR Review, Houston Roundball Review, of course, on YouTube, Houston Roundball Review on Instagram, as well as TikTok. I had an interview with someone Rocket fans know about, Natalie Alvarado, that's posted on my YouTube channel. She's the instructor of everything over there, dance-related, entertainment-related for the Rockets. I was invited to be talk Cougs and H-Town basketball on the Ad Drop podcast. That'll be posted tomorrow on Wednesday with Terrence Briggs, I believe is his last name. Terrence invited me to be on there talking Cougs and TSU and Prairie View and HCU, etc. So that was fun to do. Talking basketball is always a thrill for me. But HoustonRoundBallReview.com. Been doing this a long time, since 1994. Houston Roundball Review, local name, global perspective.
And Dayon, where can people find you? Anything else you'd like to plug?
Find me on all social media. That's at Dayon Dunlap. That's at DAYON DUNLAP. Of course, follow our social media accounts. Let's Rage Coogs on TikTok and Instagram, and also Pod Slamma Jamma, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you all for the continual support. Thank you all for tuning in for the live post game. Appreciate all the comments and interactions. And as we continue to go on, we got more comments. Stay locked in.
We got more, like Chris always says, onward and upward. Once again, the final score from New Orleans: number 1 Houston Cougars 80, the Tulane Green Wave 60. Houston Cougars return to action on Sunday afternoon inside the Fertitta Center against the Temple Owls. That'll be a 2 p.m. tip-off Central Time, and once again in Houston at the Fertitta Center. Until then, we'll be back following the conclusion of that game here for Let's Rage Coogs. Take care, and as always, Dayon, you get the final say. Close it out.
Go Cougs.